At 81, Pattie Boyd finally feels ready to speak the truth. Not the tabloid version of her life, not the glossy magazine features that once called her a muse, but the real story of a young woman who found herself at the heart of one of the greatest love stories and heartbreaks in rock and roll history. Her life has often been told through the lens of others, the Beatle who adored her, the guitarist who worshipped her, and the songs she inspired that still echo through time. But behind the fame, the beauty, and the timeless images lies a woman who spent decades trying to understand love, fame, and herself. Born Patricia Ann Boyd on March 17, 1944, in Somerset, England, she was raised in a family that moved constantly because of her father's Royal Air Force service. Those early years of travel gave her a sense of grace and adaptability, but they also taught her that stability could vanish overnight, a lesson that would later mirror her own relationships. By the time the family settled in London, Pattie had learned how to fit in anywhere, how to smile through change, and how to carry herself with quiet poise, qualities that would later capture the attention of the world. London in the early 1960s was a revolution in motion. The air buzzed with possibility, rebellion, and a sense of youth reclaiming the world. When Pattie started working as a shampoo girl at Elizabeth Arden's salon, she was just another young woman in the city trying to find her path. But fate had other plans. A photographer from Honey magazine spotted her delicate beauty and encouraged her to model. Within months, Pattie Boyd was gracing the pages of Vogue and Vanity Fair, embodying the fresh, free-spirited energy of the swinging 60s. Her look was effortless. Big eyes, soft smile, and that blend of innocence and allure that defined the era. She wasn't just a model. She was a reflection of a generation finding its voice. And yet, beneath the glamour, she was still that grounded girl from Somerset who had learned to adapt to a world that kept changing around her. She couldn't have imagined that her next assignment would introduce her to a man whose love and fame would alter the course of her life forever. It was 1964 when Pattie was cast as a schoolgirl in A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles' first film. On set, she met George Harrison, the quiet Beatle, the one who often let John and Paul take the spotlight. George was shy but magnetic. He wasn't like anyone Pattie had ever met. His gentle wit and soulful eyes drew her in immediately, and he was equally smitten. By the end of the day, he asked her out to dinner. She turned him down at first. She already had a boyfriend, but George was persistent in the most charming way. "Will you marry me then if you won't have dinner?" he quipped, half joking. That moment, playful and pure, was the beginning of a romance that would soon become legendary. Within a few years, Pattie and George were inseparable. They married in 1966, and suddenly Pattie found herself living inside the whirlwind that was Beatlemania. Fans followed their every move, and her life, once simple and private, was now shared with millions. She loved George deeply, but being the wife of a Beatle was far from easy. The constant touring, the press, and the pressure to remain perfect weighed heavily on her. Behind the public smiles, their marriage began to strain under the weight of fame. George's spiritual awakening would shape much of their marriage. He became deeply interested in Indian philosophy, meditation, and Hinduism, and while Pattie supported his search for meaning, she often felt left behind. Their home was filled with sitars, incense, and spiritual teachers. Sometimes she felt like a visitor in her own life, surrounded by people speaking a language she couldn't fully understand. George's devotion to his faith was beautiful but consuming. As he withdrew into his spiritual journey, Pattie began to feel invisible. The man who once looked at her like she was his world now seemed lost in a different one. Still, she tried to hold on. They were young, in love, and tied to a cultural movement bigger than either of them. But the cracks deepened. George's affairs, particularly his relationship with Ringo Starr's wife, Maureen, were painful betrayals that Pattie struggled to accept. The girl who had once represented freedom and modernity was now living in quiet heartbreak behind the walls of Friar Park, their sprawling estate. She had everything, fame, beauty, and wealth, yet she often felt deeply alone. It was during those years of emotional isolation that another man began to quietly circle her world, Eric Clapton. He was one of George's closest friends, a brilliant guitarist whose music carried the same kind of soul and yearning that Pattie saw in George when they first met. Eric fell deeply in love with her, almost obsessively so. He saw in Pattie not just beauty, but a kind of melancholy that matched his own. When he wrote Layla, one of the greatest love songs in rock history, it was a cry for her, a desperate confession of forbidden love. Pattie later said that when she first heard it, she was both flattered and frightened. It was overwhelming to know that two of the world's most famous musicians had written songs for her, George's Something and Eric's Layla. Yet while the world saw her as a muse, she felt more like a woman trapped between two hearts, one fading, one on fire. The love triangle became the stuff of legend, but for Pattie it was a personal torment. She never sought the attention or the mythology that followed. She simply wanted to be loved for who she was, not as a symbol of someone else's inspiration. By the early 1970s, her marriage to George had unraveled. The man who had once made her feel like the center of the universe was now distant and unfaithful, and Pattie finally decided to walk away. It was one of the hardest decisions of her life. George's parting words were kind and oddly peaceful. "I love you. I always will. But I can't give you what you need." Their separation was not marked by anger but by sadness. Two souls who had simply grown in different directions. Soon after, Eric Clapton re-entered her life, this time not as a friend, but as a man determined to win her heart. Eric's passion was intense, sometimes self-destructive. He had battled addiction, loneliness, and the shadow of George's friendship, but his love for Pattie was undeniable. After years of turmoil, they married in 1979. For a time, Pattie believed she had finally found the love she had been searching for, the deep connection that fame had always denied her. Yet even this marriage carried its own heartbreak. Eric's struggles with substance abuse and infidelity eventually tore them apart. Once again, Pattie found herself in the role she knew too well, the woman who inspired great art but suffered quietly behind it. Looking back now, Pattie Boyd speaks of those years with surprising grace. She doesn't dwell on bitterness or regret. Instead, she sees her life as a series of lessons about love, self-worth, and identity. For decades, she had been known as the Muse, the woman behind songs like Something, Layla, and Wonderful Tonight. But at 81, she finally feels free to see herself beyond that label. She has spoken openly about how those experiences taught her the importance of self-love, that no amount of adoration from the world can fill the emptiness that comes from losing yourself. In her later years, Pattie found peace through photography, turning her lens toward the very world that once objectified her. Through photography, she discovered a new voice, one that was entirely her own. Her exhibitions, filled with intimate portraits of the 1960s music scene, reveal not just history but perspective, the point of view of a woman who was there, who lived it, who felt it all. When asked about George, Pattie's words are tender, not tragic. She describes him as her first great love, a man of deep spirituality, humor, and contradiction. "He was searching," she once said, "always searching for something beyond what any of us could give him." Despite the pain, she remembers their moments of laughter, music, and quiet connection. George's death in 2001 was a loss that reopened old emotions, but Pattie found comfort in knowing that their love, though imperfect, was real. As for Eric, she regards him with a mix of affection and sorrow. "He was brilliant but broken," she said in one interview. "He loved me deeply, but he didn't love himself." These reflections reveal a woman who has made peace with her past, who understands now that love, no matter how passionate, cannot heal another person's wounds. Her honesty carries no bitterness, only wisdom. Pattie's truth, the one she holds on to now, is that her story was never just about being loved by famous men. It was about learning to stand on her own after the applause faded. For years, the world saw her as a symbol of beauty, of inspiration, of the golden age of rock and roll, but few saw the loneliness that often came with it. In her autobiography, Wonderful Today, she wrote about the joy and pain of those relationships with remarkable candor. She admitted that for much of her life, she measured her worth by how others saw her. But in her later years, she began to rebuild her sense of self, piece by piece. Not as someone's muse, but as an artist, a survivor, and a woman who finally found peace in solitude. That is the truth she now shares. That love, even when it breaks you, can also awaken you. It can teach you who you are beneath all the illusion. Today, when she looks back at the young woman she once was, the girl in the London salon, the bride beside a Beatle, the woman behind the songs that changed music forever, she feels compassion, not regret. "I was searching too," she says softly. Just like George. At 81, Pattie Boyd lives quietly, surrounded by her photographs, her memories, and the calm that she spent a lifetime trying to find. She often says she feels grateful. Grateful for the love she had, for the music it inspired, and even for the heartbreak that taught her resilience. Because, as she puts it, every beautiful thing in my life came from something that once hurt. And maybe that's the truest thing of all. For decades, the world saw her as the woman who inspired others to greatness. But the truth Pattie tells now, the truth she kept for herself for so long, is that she too was extraordinary. Not because of the songs written for her, but because she lived through them, learned from them, and emerged whole.